The Bible Treasury. A monthly magazine of papers on scriptural subjects. Article 22, Volume 9, 1872, and 1873. Review. The True Theory of the Greek Aorist. By William Howell, of the Bristol Grammar School, etc. 1873. 348. The attention of Christians interested in the study of the Greek Testament is directed to this little pamphlet, especially at a time when some essays on Greek syntax have given a one-sided bias to minds inexperienced in such pursuits. Undoubtedly the rigid rule, never translate the aorist by have, is extremely compendious and would save a world of difficulty. But unhappily it is an error, for there are very frequent cases both in the sacred writings and in profane where the rule fails, and this, for the simple reason that the English preterite is not equivalent to the Greek aorist. The assumption that it is must, therefore, be, as it is in fact, attended by such an abundance of unquestionable exceptions as to disprove the supposed rule. But there is the less reason to say more now, as the subject has been already handled in these pages. In the first division of the tract, Mr. H discusses the statements of Buttman, Donaldson, Jelf, and others. He endeavors to show from the usage of English, where a so-called present may also express past and future, and where a past may express a future, that the Greek aorist, confessedly indefinite, may be something more than is alleged. He seeks to nullify the precise position of modern grammarians by the conclusions of each and all. This, however, is rather negative criticism, and the question cannot be decided by lively sallies on the one side, any more than by slips or mistakes on the other. In the second part of the inquiry, Mr. H asks, what is this inherent power of the aorist? His answer is, that the aorist tenses were designed as supernumerary tenses to be used for any and all the other tenses according to the taste of the writer. In support of this the following points are offered. 1. These aorists were first employed in a comparatively advanced stage of the development of the Greek language, the second aorist being more ancient than the first. 2. They have displayed their character by a gradual and eventually an utter extinction of the ancient perfect and pluperfect tenses. 3. It is admitted by authorities that they have been more or less employed instead of all the other tenses. Euphony and expressiveness, he thinks, may have given birth to the first aorist. The following 18 illustrations Mr. H cites chiefly from the historical books of the New Testament. These I proceed to examine as of interest and importance to the Christian. He wishes to prove that the present, etc., might have fairly done duty instead of the aorist. My aim is to show that the aorist is employed with propriety, even though in some cases another tense might have been used with little or no sensible loss. 1. Matthew 3 verse 3, Hetoimus 8, 1a or, prepare ye the way, etc., poiite, President, make his paths straight. Hebrews 12 verse 13, poies 8, 1a or, make straight paths. 2. Matthew 6 verse 25, merimnate, President, take no thought. Matthew 6 verse 31, merimseat, 1a or, idem. 3. Matthew 10 verse 11, kekaimein 8, 1a or, there abide. Luke 9 verse 4, ekaimenete, President, idem. 4. Matthew 11 verse 15, d, akato, C note, President, he that hath ears to hear, let him hear. Note. So everywhere in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Revelation 2 verse 7, akausato, C note, 1a or, anear, etc. Note. So everywhere in Revelation. 5. Matthew 17 verse 17, phreitmoi, President, bring him hither to me. Mark 9 verse 10, phreitpros me, President, idem. Luke 9 verse 41, prosegige, 2a or, idem. 6. Matthew 21 verse 2, poreuthete, 1 or, go into the village. Mark 11 verse 2, cupegete, President, idem. Luke 19 verse 30, idem, idem. 7. Matthew 6 verse 11, dos, 2a or, give us this day our daily bread. Luke 11 verse 3, didu, President mid, idem. 8. Hebrew 3 verse 1, Catanuis 8, 1a or, consider the high priest. Hebrews 12 verse 3, analogize us, 1a or, consider him that endured. Hebrews 7 verse 4, theority, pros, consider how great this man was. Hebrews 10 verse 24, Katanuman, President, let us consider one another. 9. Matthew 11 verse 46, Kai zetound zort on kritzai, they sought to lay hands on him. Mark 12 verse 12, Kai ed zetown ort on kritzai, idem. Luke 20 verse 19, Kai ed zetis anipabuln, idem. John 7 verse 30, ed zetown an ort on piasai, they sought therefore to take him. 10. Acts 9 verse 26, eper erato kolastai, he essayed to join himself. Acts 16 verse 7, eper iras and poreastai, they essayed to go. Hebrews 11 verse 29, Pyron labents, essaying to go. 11. Matthew 26 verse 4, Senbuleu zento, 1a or. Indiana, consulted that they might, etc. Mark 14 verse 1, Edzitown, imp. Indiana, sought how they might. 12. Luke 7 verse 38, Eximace, imp. Indiana, did wipe, etc. John 12 verse 3, Eximax, 1 nor. Indiana, wiped, etc. 13. Matthew 13 verse 3, Spain, President inf, so went forth to sow. Mark 4 verse 8, spare iri, 1a or. Inf, idem. So Luke 14. Matthew 11 verse 9, exulthet, 2 nor. Including, what went ye out to see? Luke 7 verse 24, exilithate, per. Idem. 15. Matthew 9 verse 13, ugar elthan, 2a or, kalesai, I came not to call. Mark 2 verse 17, idem. Luke 5 verse 32, ukilaluta, per. Kalesai, idem. 16. 2 Corinthians 1 verse 12, and Strapiman, 2a or. P. We have had our conversation. Ephesians 2 verse 3, idem, we had, etc. 17. John 3 verse 32, kai ho herikai ekaus, and what he hath seen and heard. 18. John 15 verse 6, ian metis meinai emoi, iblithexo, if a man abide not in me, he is cast forth. The future Bibles 8 I would have given the same sense. Farah, Greek syntax. 1. It would be strange indeed if the aorist in the first verb, the present in the second, were used with no precise object, seeing that the Septuagint have thus rendered the prophet, and so it appears in all the synoptic evangelists, who are by no means used merely to repeat their original. To me it seems plain that, while the paths are left for continuous or repeated action in detail, the way of Jehovah is viewed as having been made ready with promptness. The same principle applies to Hebrews 13, and the more strikingly, because the aorists of 12 and 13 are followed by an emphatic use of the present in 14. 2. The disciples were not to be anxious, pr, as a habit as to food and raiment. A look at the birds, an observation of the lilies, however transient, might well reprove it. They were not to be anxious, or, at all, said the Lord, not for the morrow. Verse 34, it is a stronger statement, excluding even a single instance. 3. The phrase of Matthew seems correctly due to Hosan exulthet, which puts a term, whereas Luke's is expressly different and equally exact, kai ekai than exitus. Either might be said with truth, but they are not of the same value, and there is no ground for charging with looseness the phraseology of one evangelist more than another. 4. The Lord was still speaking in the Gospel. In the Revelation it is a final warning given peremptorily in each assembly's case. 5. In Luke it is a precise order to the Father, and so also singular. In the two first it is more general, as marked in the tense as well as the number. 6. In Matthew 21 verse 2 the true reading is probably not poreuthit but poruith, aleph, b, d, l, z, 33, 13, 61, 69, 126, 157, 346. Original use eb, and so the tense is the same as that of hupegit in Mark and Luke. 7. The aorist for the single act, sumeron, in Matthew is just as proper as the present for the habit, to kathemeron, in Luke. They could not be interchanged without altering each clause. 8. The two aorists are acts viewed as consummated, or in themselves, the two present as calling for continuous consideration. 9. The effort is rendered more definite in Luke by the use in him only of en ortite herai, which accounts for exitus and there only. 10. The aorist in Hebrews 11 verse 29 is strictly correct as being a historical fact. The imperfect in acts denotes continued or repeated effort in the act. 11. A similar remark applies to the aorist in Matthew 24 verse 4, as compared with the imperfect in Mark 14 verse 1. 12. So in Luke 7 verse 38, it is the graphic power of the imperative, whilst John 12 verse 3 presents no more than the fact historically. 13. If a sower go forth on his task, it might be said either spain or spare irai, viewed continuously or as a point. In fact Aleph, D, L, M, X, with more than 60 cursives, have spare irai in Matthew 13 verse 3, while in verse 4 of both Gospels entoi spain is used necessarily because it is a course of action, not an act in itself. Thus we see, even when either might be used, that there are limits. 14. The difference is that the perfect gives vigor to style where it is suitable or desired by presenting the fact with its effects up to the present. The aorist gives the past only. In Luke, therefore, it should be have, or, are, ye gone out, etc. 15. So with the next set, I am not come to call represents Luke. I have dined, to use an illustration of our authors, could only be used with propriety of today. 16. There is no need to translate and strap him on differently in 2 Corinthians 1 verse 13 and in Ephesians 2 verse 3, we bore ourselves, or had our way of life suiting both, and so in fact Mr. Green and Dean A., two of the most recent translators, recognize no difference. 17. I see no reason for doubting here also the distinction between the perfect and the aorist, the former expressing a permanent effect, while the latter does not go beyond the act or circumstance itself. 18. No doubt, in ordinary Greek, the future would as a rule be found in the epidosis, but this does not warrant one to say that the future would have given the same sense as the aorist, or another to infer that the aorist is equivalent to a future, or a present, or a perfect. It seems to my mind that our Lord used what best expressed his mind, and that none but the aorist could here convey with the same force the man cast out who abode not in him. It may be called rhetorical, but it vividly gives the instant issue, as he saw it, of abandoning him. Other results follow at length, and they are so expressed. What appears to have misled our author is the difference of idiom. For it is one thing to give a fair English version, another to trace the precise force and shades of difference in the Greek. To suppose that imperfects, aorists, and perfects, can be used indifferently in the same sentence is to destroy the precision of language. To explain why each is used rather than any other is exactly the business of a scholar, not to explain them all away. And in New Testament Greek it must be remembered that the believer in inspiration is entitled to have the assurance that every minute difference is used with divine exactness and with a purpose worthy of him who wrote it.